Dixon, welcome to This Week in Music. You see his name there on Twitch, Kenny Got Soul. Welcome. We'll give you a round of applause. How we doing?
Appreciate it.
First question, if you were going to describe yourself in 30 seconds or less, who is Kenny Got Soul?
So Kenyon Dixon first. And man, I'm an R&B connoisseur, R&B maker, lover of all things R&B. I'm a father. I am a full circle creative, just a creative mind in general. And just I'm a filler, I guess so. I think I operate in this space a lot of just feeling and sensing everything that's going on around me. So I think all of that into one big melting pot. That's probably who I am.
I love it. I love it. Kenyon. I got that right. I get that right. So thank you for correcting me.
No
Born
worries.
and raised in South LA. Talk to us first. Tell us, who was the math teacher that first heard you singing and then wanted to get you into the talent shows? Tell us about that.
So I'm from Watts, California, the Jordan Downs Projects, born and raised. And so when I was in high school, actually, that's kind of when my math teacher that I speak about a lot, Angelique Sims, who's still, now a good friend of mine. She kind of, when I went to Washington Prep High School, a friend kind of snitched on me and told that they knew I could sing. And she heard me one day. And when she heard me, and found out that I was also like a trained dancer and all of this stuff, she started pushing me in all the assemblies to sing for graduation, like all this stuff. And that really kind of got me back into the arts in school, because when I left the school I was at, I pretty much wanted to be done with like the arts overall. I wanted to, come to a new school, different persona, didn't want anybody to know I had any talent, really. I just wanted to be normal. So got to the school and yeah, she was the one, Miss Sims, my algebra teacher. She is who
Nice.
pushed me into doing that. So I credit her for a huge part of my success.
Okay, Carolyn, you can go ahead. I got a few questions. I know you got some questions there, so go ahead.
I do. First, I want to say Happy Father's Day, and Happy
Thank
Father's
you.
Day to all the fathers that are watching or online with us today
Appreciate
during this interview. Yes. But yeah, I want to talk about Closer
Let's do
because
it.
in this No Skips tour.
Okay, I'm ready.
So we know that the pandemic, or we've kind of been told the pandemic kind of allowed people to recreate themselves or rethink the way they're going to um, operate, basically. A lot of creatives did it, but how did the pandemic reset you, if it did, to where you are now? Now, that's not to say you've been making albums for quite some time
Hmm.
and Grammy nominated before this year and many more things going on, but it feels like the energy of Kenyon Dixon and between the Expectations release and now Closer, it just feels like you just was like, I'm leaning in now. And so I'm blaming it on the pandemic, but what was it?
Yeah. No, that's actually a very good observation. So the pandemic for me, what I think it did was open up space for what I was already investing in. So what happened during the pandemic is a lot of creatives who, especially a lot of like major label artists, have to rely on a system to be able to produce product. I've always been extremely self-sufficient. I've always written all of my own music, started off producing my own music, mixing my own music. Like that was a space I started in. So even now, I cut 99.9. Actually, I'll say 100%. I cut 100% of my songs at my house first. So what happened during the pandemic? There was a kind of a we slowed down the production of being able to produce music to the masses because resources were shut down. Some labels were no longer open, allowing people in the buildings. These studios were shutting down. But me, I've been at home myself this entire time making music. So actually, nothing changed for my creative process. What happened was, I believe that people started to finally welcome artists from sources that they aren't used to receiving the art from, and they were okay with finally looking in other places. for the music that they love, because we wanted it, but it wasn't being produced. And so I think the pandemic for sure set me up for where I am right now. Didn't change my work ethic, but it changed, I would say, some of the listeners' reception, or the masses' reception to real R&B. And they wanted it and they were hungry for it. And I think that's also a testament to what we think is so different between 90s 2000 R&B and now. There was less of it being produced, and so you had to wait and actually work up an appetite to be excited and anxious about something coming out. So what happened during the pandemic is you started getting starved. You were so used to getting all of this music every other day, and now you had to wait because people couldn't do it. And it just so happened I was putting out music that people loved, and it grew my fan base even more during then, and people really began to tap into it. So that's my story and my connection to the pandemic, and how I was able to use it as a catalyst to get where I am now.
Yeah,
So
I will quickly say the fact that you called yourself a feeler, I think a lot of it was that there was a lot of introspection about
For sure.
relationships, about love, about how you want to show up, about whether or not you really do want to go back to an ex or whatever.
Mhm.
I think people had a lot of existential crises that may have even been a good doorway, if you will, to feelings in this R&B thing, where we really
Yes.
are talking about, man, I
Yeah.
think I'm in love.
yeah, I had a follow up question for you. What's up, CC? C Cruz in the building. You said during the pandemic, people had to get used to kind of discovering music in new pathways or different places than they were used to. Can you
Mhm.
speak to what were some of those pathways, those new pathways?
So I think we have the radio conversation a lot. I combat that conversation because I still beg to differ that the majority of people in the world are riding around in the car listening to the radio to find new artists, but that seems to be what we what we've settled for. But I think there were just even a lot of outlets we know don't play to independent music artists. They play to major artists. A lot of it is a part of marketing and budgets, and they're being able to get placed on these platforms, as they should, but they're being able to get placed on these platforms because they have the budget and the strategy and the resources. And so what happened was also these outlets needed music to keep going, and you don't have music from the artists that you're used to working with more frequently. And so even they started to tap into a lot more like independent artists, or artists who just weren't coming from major labels. And I think people started to lean even more into playlists. What I thought was beautiful about the playlist being created throughout the pandemic is people also started to lean more into other listeners' playlists, not just editorial playlists, but I would
Mhm.
see so many tweets go viral of people saying, "I'm at home, here's what I'm listening to." And next thing you know, you see thousands of retweets because people are trying to share, spread some music because nobody knows where to get it from. Or at least that's what I've heard. So I think yeah, as far as different outlets, I think that's what was happening. People were starting to be not necessarily new outlets, but they just gave more attention to some outlets that were overlooked often, and just more credit to the listener. I think the listener was a huge part of what made a lot of artists successful during the pandemic. Our fan base, like they really pushed us forward because that was also their opportunity to tell everybody else who's saying they didn't have anything to listen to, like, well, here's who I'm listening to. And I saw that happen in real time too. So I think everybody was just a little more receptive to just things they weren't used to in general, even outside of music. I
Yeah,
think the
yeah,
pandemic shaped people into being open just about things, period.
Yeah.
very true.
I just want to co-sign. Like, that's so true. I think I was all of a sudden open to literally asking people, what are you listening to? And it wasn't professional people. It wasn't my music supervisor
Uh-huh.
friends or whatever. It literally was cousins and like people who supposedly don't know music. I wanted to know what they were listening to.
Uh-huh.
I will say, my sister introduced me to your music. Her name is Melissa, and she loved circles.
Uh-huh.
So Circles, what album was that and what year was that released? I want to remind people you are not a new artist.
Jesus Christ. I want to say Circles may have come out in 2012. So
Okay.
the interesting thing about Circles, it was the first deal I had ever done was a production deal, and the production company I was signed to, that was the first record that I did with them.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, and so I recorded that record. That project I don't speak of, but what I did do was
Oh,
I liked Circles so much that when I left from that production group, I took that song and put it on what I consider to be my first project, the project called Hollywood and Highland. So Circles was on there in about 2014 maybe, but 2012 is when that record was created.
okay.
Maybe in
Okay.
2007, but I think 2012.
So one thing I also noticed from before the pandemic and after, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but you seem to have so much more intricate backgrounds and vocal arrangement. Now we always knew you could, right? Because you worked with other R&B groups, and you can talk about that as well. But what did you intentionally, in terms of creating your vision for Expectations and for Now Closer, say like, I am going to lean into this vocal arrangement and I'm going to put every possible, thing. Like, talk about that creative process or how it may have grown.
Got you. So I think I've always been heavy in the arrangement space. Especially with BGVs. That's a lot of my career. I toured for 10 plus years as a background vocalist with tons of different artists. And so that's a space that I know very well, that I've always been comfortable in. And so what was really cool about, being on the artist side and arranging backgrounds is that I still understood the art of creating intricate backgrounds, but still keeping them out of the way of the lead, because that's what you learn touring as a background vocalist, how to add to, but stay out of the way at the same time. So I think I worked backwards because live music, I kind of like jumped into immediately after I graduated high school. I was already involved in it prior to that, but as a career. So I think the reason I say I think I kind of approached it more backwards than everybody else, I think I took my live experience and brought that to my records versus I'm not what we call a studio rat. Like, I'm not a studio rat. I actually hate being in the studio, but obviously I have to be there. So like what I do is, I kind of approach everything, even the way I approach my backgrounds. I don't stack a lot of stuff because I like them to demand their space. Like, as far as what the note is, I don't do a lot of stacking. I like, let's make this background work and live, and let's add to it, because I won't, like, everything is done like purposely. I just tweeted actually the other day that got a lot of traction about how I hate laying backgrounds and then engineers like turning them to where you can't even hear them at all. And it's like, the reason I did this, and to speak to what I said about me being a filler, is because it made me feel something. So it changes my mind about the song when it's no longer audible. So like, I need it present. I need it, in a space where I can feel it. But I feel like that's what, that's what my approach to background vocals are. Anything I ever sing on a record is because I felt like it should be there. So that it's so important to be able to, have that stuff in the space. So when I arrange, whether for my own stuff or I do a lot of arranging for other people as well, it's always, I filter everything through my feelings. I trust my feelings about what I know about music.
Okay. All right. So, Amani, I think you're hearing what I'm hearing.
Go ahead. I am. I wanted to go back and ask some questions about being on tour, because that's a whole interesting story in itself.
That was a good segue for music. So let's do music after you ask the question.
Okay, yeah, we'll do music, but share with us some of maybe the most valuable lessons you learned on tour with people like TGT, Let Us See, like all the people you've been on tour with. What have been some of the most valuable learnings you've acquired by being around them?
Man, so I've worked with so many different people, and I feel like I've learned so much from each of them, and even in like different capacities, because some of them I've toured with as a background vocalist, but like Let Us See, for example, I toured with opening as support, which is also crazy because me and Led talked about it. She didn't know back in maybe 2018, I think so. I was a part of the house band for the BET Awards, and we did the Anita Baker tribute, and Lettucey was one of the singers. She had no idea that I was singing for her then, but so many different lessons. One of the greatest lessons I would extend to anybody when it comes to touring or just being in that world is to be likable. I've seen so many amazing people lose opportunity because they don't understand that this is still work, and you are technically in these settings, anybody is really replaceable. So, and they'd rather work with somebody less talented, who's willing to learn and is a pleasure to be around, than somebody who's amazing but like a thorn to work with. And I think that's I'm great at what I do, but that's also a huge part of why I've been able to work as long as I have, because I know how to be around people, stay out of the way, which I'll always do. And just be respectful. There's a lot of real-time navigation. That's where me being a filler also comes in, because I pick up on stuff immediately and can adapt without anything having to be said. But there's so much. Working with Usher, I did the BET Awards back in 2012 with Usher. I think Climax had just came out. And Usher is like one of my favorite artists ever. I've learned so much from him. And one thing I learned from him in that rehearsal was just the precision and dedication to the art. I'll never forget, we were in there rehearsing, and he was getting fitted in the other room for his wardrobe, and you could hear them handing him stuff and changing clothes. And I mean, he never missed a note. And I just remember being like, this is incredible. You haven't even stopped singing. Like, you're doing all of this stuff still flawless. And like, that commitment to me was amazing to see. Justin, for example, Justin Timberlake, same thing with the commitment. Justin had one of my first conversations with me prior to becoming a father. I was out actually on the road in London with him, and I had my phone on the stage because right before we walked on, I had got a text about my daughter's mom like going into labor, and like, he had the dad talk with me, and it was so cool to see because he was in that space, so that's something I'm seeing in real time, what it looks like to be a father and balance, what I'm saying, still having the career. And like Tyrese is a great example. Tyrese is from where I'm from in Watts. We don't get a lot of like heroes, as most people would think. Our area, we have to work so hard to even prove people wrong about like the reputation and like what comes out of the neighborhood. So Tyrese was a prime example for me to seeing what it looks like to come from my neighborhood, be successful. It's so important, especially as a young Black boy, to have that representation of when you have an environment of so many other things you can get into. So important to have that representation of the thing that you can get into that actually, helps you in the long run. So I've learned things on the music end, but also in these music settings, I've learned so much like real life lessons from the artists, because I tap into, just people and who they are and being good people. Like, I don't work with anybody I don't like, and they'll let you know, like, if the vibe is not right, I'll walk off the gig respectfully and send you somebody who I think could work. But
let me quickly say, I have to say that. Did you know he said musicians, if he has to walk off a gig, he sends somebody else. Always have people to refer.
Always.
It goes back to community. That goes back to relationship. You always want to have 2 or 3 people who support, like, who does what you do, whether they do it better or not, so that you can not only refer, but you can, iron sharpens iron. And it's iron. You can't have iron and oranges. That's going to hurt somebody. Find somebody like you who's going to improve you that you can also refer. I just had to stop on that one.
100%.
And do that. So, okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So Kelly, you want to kind of get some music questions now? We can do that.
I thought we were going to play some music. We're talking about his background, and I'm over here like, we can't talk too much longer about the music. So,
okay.
I think we have 3 or 4 selections up. Amani, do you want to choose? Or you want to have Kenyon choose from closer?
Why don't you give us a couple tracks from your album you want us to play? We'll play probably through at least the second chorus, and kind of you can talk about the track and maybe the inspiration, and just kind of fill us in on some things, kind of behind the scenes look from some of the tracks, if you like.
Got you. Wow, tough one for me. We can start at the top of the album, I guess. We can go with the
Marvin
first
Gaye.
track, Marvin Gaye. Yep.
Marvin Gaye. Okay, here we go. Marvin Gaye.
You in a rush for what? Ain't gotta hurry up. Let's have the time of our lives. Haven't you heard when we get to it carefully? We'll be in for a surprise. Let's take the long way home. We can afford to roam so many places unseen. If we go slow tonight, this could be paradise. Get everything that we need. Make it count. Every letter. When we care, ain't it better? Feel the love. It's forever. So you should just relax and let me take my time. Is it okay if I take my time? Show you how it feels when I connect to you. Sexual, killing all night. Is it okay if I take my time? Show you how it feels when I connect to you. Sexual, killing all night. We get in the mood and then that's when the fun begins. Journey into the unknown. Wherever it thought is why fantasies level out. Just you and I on our own. There's a couple of ways to touch. Intimacy is mine, more than the things that we see. If we go slow tonight, this could be paradise. Get everything that we need. Make it count. Every letter. When we care, ain't it better? Feel the love. It's forever. So you should just relax and let me take my time. Is it okay if I take my time? Oh, show you how it feels when I connect to you. Sexual, killing all night. Is it okay if I take my time? Show you how it feels when I connect to you. Sexual, killing all night, yeah. Oh. Yeah. So you should just relax and make it count. Every letter. When we care, ain't it better? Feel the love, it's forever. So you should just relax and let me take my time. Is it okay if I take my time? Oh, show you how it feels when I connect to you. Sexual, killing all night. Is it okay if I take my time? Show you how it feels when I connect to you. Sexual, killing all night.
All right, we get some applause right there. That's a lot there. Politic, and thank you for the bids. What was the inspiration behind that song?
Man, so one, you can't have a song called Marvin Gaye and not like have the vibes. So Marvin was a huge inspiration behind this entire album, but his influence on that song in particular was I've always found Marvin's finesse very intriguing. There's a way that he sings and it's effortless, but it's so like there's like a lot of energy there, and not just energy like high level energies, like as far as like physical exhaustion, but like there's a lot of just energy, like like if you know. So it's I'm trying to find a way to just channel that. I've always thought, I've considered myself to be the same as far as like very laid back and smooth, but I think it's interesting how you can approach music and manipulate it to just do certain things. And so the other interesting thing about that song is I went back and forth with wanting it to start off the album, and I just kept thinking like, well, I don't know if I want to put a song like this at the beginning of the album, especially considering the bridge having so much energy, and then like mellowing back down like with the rest of the songs. And I was like, absolutely, you should. Like, that's the amazing thing about being an artist. You have to like find that audacity to do stuff. Like, it doesn't have to make sense. You just trust yourself, and if you know that you've created some great art, if it feels right, just make sure it lands. And so yeah, that song was all about, it's an opener. It's the opening to a show. It's not even just about the album. Like, that is an introduction to the Kenyon Dixon like show. This is that era of it, but this is what you should know about me. That's how Marvin Gaye was for me.
Okay. Art One Phone Box, hello. Good to see you. Alex, what's up? Glad you made it. Good to see you too. I'm curious, like, I've done a lot of reading. We do a lot of research in the classes that I teach at Cal State Fulton about albums, and many artists are choosing to kind of do more like EPs instead of albums. Why did you choose to do an album, and what's your thought on that trend in the music industry?
Well, I know myself. I'm an albums artist. That's where my magic is. I think some people can do EPs, and I've done them, but some people can do EPs, and that's kind of like the space that they live in. The space that they live in. I believe my story and what I have to tell can only be detailed in full-length projects. And I think that me being an albums artist, I don't focus on one song, so it doesn't make sense to me until there's an entire body of work. And my goal is different. I desire to be able to tour off of, like, for the rest of my life off of this music that I'm putting out. And you have to put out great albums to be able to do that. You can't just drop, a song here and there. But I think I don't think there's anything wrong with the trend. I think I see two different sides to that. I see the listeners' complaint about the trend and, wanting more music. But as an independent artist, I also see it on our side that it can be exhausting for artists to create these full-length projects, and it takes a lot of resources. Like, again, it just so happens that I'm mainly self-sufficient, so I'm able to get it done. But I know what that's like I've seen what that's like to, have to go to like different producers and like get studio time, get like that stuff gets expensive. So in favor of the independent artists as well, I understand why sometimes they just put out EPs, because it's the most you can do sometimes. And then you drop these full-length projects that you like put your blood, sweat, and tears in, and there's no guarantee that you'll even get the support that you thought you would from it. So yeah, but for myself, like I said, my magic is in creating full-length albums. That's just a space I live in.
Love it.
Yeah, that's okay. So I want to talk about audience, building an audience. You kind of already kind of touched on creating a vision and basically saying, like, if it feels authentic to you, you stick to that, right? Mm-hmm. But there's a space between creating your vision and having that completely insular to how you see yourself and feeding your audience, right? Mm-hmm. Were there any audience questions you were asking yourself as you were making Closer?
The main thing I considered with making that album was, so I listened to their complaints about the current state of R&B. Okay. It's so interesting though, because the people I listened to were actually not my core fan base, because my core fan base already knows the type of music that I make and they appreciate it. So I listened to the conversations of the people who don't know what my audience knows. And so I would see them say stuff like, we miss the feeling of 90s, 2000s R&B. Where are the singers at? Where are the songs that's longer than a minute and a half? Where's like they, I listened to those complaints and I said, well, pretty much I'm going to do what I've already been doing, but now I'm just going to focus in more and make it more intentional, because my fan base is going to love what I do. They're already subscribed to what I'm doing. Now I need to take a little bit of that and send some energy y'all way, so that y'all know what, what's still out here. And so I think those were the questions that I asked myself, just as a listener, as a connoisseur. If I listened to my album, what would I think? I executed it so well as far as asking the questions, that the questions I actually had, I beat them to it. Before the album came out, I remember tweeting, I said, I'm just letting y'all know right now, there's a song on there that y'all are going to wish was full length. Album drops. Why would you make Expectations an interlude? I'm like, I knew, because from the listener standpoint, I'm like, I know that this is what y'all are going to want. So it was, yeah. So I did.
Playing with people is what you're saying. Playing with it. Okay.
I was like, you find the balance. But the amazing thing about that is it gives me the space to add on to the art if I want to. Now that I know, and had the feeling you guys will want this full length, or this to change, or a remix to this. These are all things that I already knew, and now that gives the album longer shelf life if I decide to expand it in any in any way.
Yeah, this is another teachable moment I want to say for the audience or whatever. This is how businesses think. How do I feel a need? Find people who are in need, and how do I feel a need? Yes, I have my current existing audience, but I am expanding, and I want more listeners, and I want to feel the need of people who are looking for R&B. So I'm gonna think, what are they looking for? Or I'm gonna literally search, where's R&B or whatever it may be, and fulfill that need. The beauty of what Kenyon is saying, though, is that he was always doing R&B, right? So he's self-advocating in that. He's not just trying to fill a need that other people have, but it's a gift that he has, right? So marrying that is how you find your audience. You figure out, what do I bring to the table? What message? How do I make people feel? What do I usually write songs about? What feels most authentic to me? Then you find those people who are looking for that, because that's the marriage, right? And you need both. Don't go out there trying to be somebody else. Don't go out there trying to be R&B Kenny or Kenny Got Soul when that ain't your job. You know what I mean?
Really?
So I just wanted to mention that in terms of finding audience, creating vision. Make sure you're coming to the table with what other people are looking for, and it's authentic to you. So wanted to say that. Armani, you had something to say?
Well, I mean, you touched on a couple of topics. One we're going to get into, which is a passion of mine, which is the current state of R&B music.
Yeah,
but maybe let's talk about. But maybe we should play Expectations as kind of a segue to that conversation.
We should. The
full length Expectations. This is Expectations, the interlude.
Featuring Alex Isley.
It's on your mind right now. Let it go. Baby, we should live in the moment, really flow. I need you here, body and soul, babe. We'll move slow, babe. Oh, so just don't say no. Little bit at a time. First your body, then your mind. Let's explore, you and I. Welcome to the other side. You just wait and see. It'll be everything. Highest heights will reach, but only if you stay. Have me your way. Stay, babe. Have me your way. Stay, babe. Stay.
All right, so hold on. We put some applause there for that. Yes. All right, One Funk Box. Keep putting those fire emotes up in the chat. Yes, definitely. See, when I think of interludes, I think of like when Keith Sweat used to always do them. When what's my Babyface used to do the interludes and the exludes, and so kind of bringing that back. I kind of more respect for that. So that was good. The segue to the question is, so I'm writing my second book. The second book is on why there are no longer any Black R&B groups on the Billboard Hot 100 charts since about 2004. And so that was my thesis in grad school. That's the topic of my next book. I'll ask you that question and see what your response is to start with.
Got you. Well, I think music business is all about the duality, and so artists, we look at the biggest part of it as the music. Anybody else looks at the biggest part of it as the business. And I think a lot of times while we don't see the music doing what we feel it should do has a lot to do with the business that happens with the music. And so I think what a lot of people don't know is how like these charts work. I think it's great accomplishments, but when you see stuff like um most added on this station are like that's all budget. That has nothing to do with the popularity of the song. And so when you talk about charts, it's much easier to make sure records are on the charts if you have the budget to create more visibility. And so I think what happened, especially with the groups and everything like that, is that the trajectory of and the demand in the music industry, there was a shift. And I think that there are people, on the business side that kind of determine this shift. Like the business of music is like very strategic. You can teach people what to be into. If you think something makes more money by what you allow to be visible, you're literally able to tell them, hey, this is what you should support now. And you're either gonna go with it or you won't. So I think what happened was, we know pop culture shapes a lot of everything in the world. I think there was a decline in what we loved in pop culture at that time. It was certain music was put out, it caught on, it gravitated, and that slowly created a decline for the visibility of R&B music. Because I still know the groups like now, but it doesn't have the same appeal, and it has everything to do with conditioning. If you're taught that this is what you should look for, then it's pretty much goes back to the conversation we were having about what was happening during the quarantine. The stuff was always there. It's just that now your perspective of it, or what it kind of filters through, has changed because there's just more emphasis on another area. So in my personal opinion, that's kind of what I've seen as far as that change, and with R&B groups and stuff like that. And it's also much more appealing when you think about the business side of it. I'm gonna make more money with less people than I will having to split my investment with a group of people. It's just and there's a bigger guarantee. You have a better chance of getting a successful single and having a successful run of an artist. Like there's a risk of groups. Anybody at any point can have a change of heart. Something could happen. They could no longer even be interested in music. You've lost your investment. So I think people have realized the music business has realized the art of, let me take one artist, create a persona. You don't have to have it. They can give you what they want you to have. It's much easier to take one person and turn them into what's going to make you your money back. And there you have it. And everything is like working together. When you look at a team, you have somebody in every department, like from, like whoever is running radio, branding, marketing, sync, like you have your whole team together, and you can circulate the artists through that system, and they either work or they don't. But that's just a lot easier to do when you have one person to have to bet on than 4 or 5 people.
Very true. Very true. What's up, Juts? Good to see you. And Simply Deja, welcome in. Thank you for stopping by. Go ahead, Carol.
I want to quickly broach the topic of the anomaly of the R&B group, Silk Sonic, and because we are running out of time, I want to allow Kenyon to specifically speak to his tour. But I also want to talk about Silk Sonic, the fact that they won Record of the Year, and kind of, are they starting a new story? And I also want to talk about the live experience. I saw their show twice in Vegas. I have never decided I was going to pay for the same show. And I started my business career in working, getting tickets and promotions for a record label. So I didn't see every show. So the fact that I needed to see that twice was a thing. And it was the persona creation, like you're talking about, Kenyon. And it also was, finally these songs that we always felt needed to be heard, getting the promotion that they needed, and coming from people who had accepted the artist. So when they came together, it was like, okay, we'll listen to this from y'all.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah.
So I want Kenyon, I want you to speak to that, why you think Silk Sonic is working, and then please do talk about the Closer tour, because I want to honor the fact that we wanted to specifically give you time to talk about that.
Got you. I think well, one, let me say Anderson and Bruno and James Fauntleroy. Let me shout out James, who's also writing and doing a lot of this music. It's good music. So that's first. You always hear, like, you know, if it's good, eventually it'll stick. Some that rings true sometimes it doesn't. But I think this is a case where that happens. And then Bruno and Anderson, like you just mentioned, that's combined star power. So what they actually brought back was the art of having superstars come together to form something greater. Because I think that that's something that's a lot different than getting, if this was two artists that nobody knew and we gave them those same songs, it wouldn't have cut through. We already have interest in Bruno. We already have interest in Anderson. What also makes Silk Sonic even more interesting, you would have never put Bruno or Anderson together. So it makes you wonder, let's see what they're about to do together, because I would have never thought that Bruno and Anderson, you know, like, I don't know what that would sound like. And I think that's amazing because they're both incredible creatives. And so I think Silk Sonic is also, considering what we just said about, you know, people's complaints about the state of R&B, if you can correctly play to nostalgia, you're going to win. That's a successful formula. That's what happens. It's the same thing I just did with my album. Again, I've already been creating this type of music, but if you can play to what people are saying that they're missing, that's the business part of the music industry. You listen to the customer. What does the customer want? But also, as an artist, is what the customers, what they're asking for, does this align with what I'm already doing with my brand? Can I cater anything to that without stepping outside of what I'm doing, and so that I stay connected to my music? There's like a bunch of, you know, questions you have to ask yourself. And I think that's what Bruno and Anderson did. There were enough pieces, even that aren't visible, in the creation of what they were doing that made it make sense. And I think the other thing about it is they're just having fun. They know that it's fun music and you can sell fun. Ledisi told me when I was on the first show we did of her Wildcard tour, I talked to her backstage. We had a long conversation, and I was telling her how much I admired seeing how she teaches her audience what to appreciate. I said, I see you go on stage, and it's like they just love anything you do. And I think that's incredible. Ledisi told me, she said, it's because I'm not performing for them. I enjoy my music. So when they see that I enjoy what I'm doing on the stage, you don't have a choice. You're literally, if that's me teaching you, I'm on stage enjoying myself. It's like you would have to come here wanting to be extremely miserable to not enjoy somebody enjoying themselves for what you actually paid to experience. So I think that that's also a formula that works. And that's why I don't make any music that I cannot relate to, because it's very hard to try and convince somebody of something that you don't believe. And people read, they can feel that energy that radiates through the stage. So when you're on stage, you're uncomfortable, you don't believe this stuff, they pick up on that, and you've lost the opportunity to commit a listener to, you know, being an actual fan. And so I think that's a huge part of Silk Sonic. You got two great artists who are already comfortable in who they are. They have great chemistry. They've made music that they both enjoy. Like, you're looking at Anderson .Paak is also, like, you know, he's a drummer. So this is stuff he gets to play the drums still. Like, Bruno's a pop star. So dancing and, you know what I'm saying? Like, kind of showcasing like the inspiration of like what we used to see in the old school. Like, he's an entertainer. That's something he would love to do, I would imagine. So I think it's just people who love stuff coming together to create more stuff that they love and making other people love it because they do.
Yeah.
Yes. Well said. Let's talk about the tour. That I do want to ask you some more questions about being an independent musician, but I'm going to put up a flyer for the tour. Tell us about the tour, what inspired your city visits. Kind of talk us through your process.
So the Closer No Skips tour, No Skips is kind of like the moniker that was given to the tour because fans alike that's what they call the album now, like the No Skips album. That was a name, literally a fan name that was given to the album. So I thought it was only right to include that in the tour. But this is a very great and historic tour for my brand because this is my first headlining tour ever. I've never done a full run. Thank you. I've never done a full run like this on my own. And so it's been amazing to watch it develop. It's so different as well. When you come from me and another one of my artist friends, we laughed about it. We both have tours coming up and we laughed about it because it's like we're used to working with all these big names and we're like putting this stuff together ourselves. Ourselves are having to see it be developed. We laughed about like waking up and being like, where's my tour bus? Where is where's Master Tour? Where's my day sheet? And it's such a different experience. But what I've loved about this process, especially as an independent artist, is now I can go and have conversations when I'm sent over offers, when we start advancing stuff. I know what to look for. I know what these splits should look like. I know everything. Like I know my tech writer like the back of my hand. If I could tell you who's playing, what they need, so I think that's been really cool. But I'm just excited to bring some classic R&B to the world. I think that's there are a lot of great acts going out, but I know my mission is to create an experience that 10 years from now people will still remember and want to revisit anytime they see me pop up in their area. I want them to feel like they're missing out if they don't come to a show. And so I'm working hard to I've invested in myself as much as I have with anybody else I've worked with. And I want my shows to look and feel just like the people that I've given 100% to. So I'm excited about the tour. We picked the cities. There are certain cities I've headlined in before, like different one-off events. Analytics, which I think a lot of people don't know when they ask about like, why you aren't coming here? Why you aren't coming here? Because the data doesn't show that it makes sense right now for me to come to that city, And so I think that's another thing that, people are unfamiliar with. We go through my Spotify, my Apple, Tidal, like we look at all of the data and analytics. They know down to my age group. They know the gender. They know like literally what cities in certain states. So they pick even certain venues were selected based on like the radius, how close it is to where the majority of my listeners are, in that state. And so that was a huge part of that. There are a lot of places I wanted to go to, that I know I have like a demand in, but that's also the importance of building a brand. You can't give everything at once. You want to create something and be able to use that as leverage to go and do more. And so that's what we're doing. We're hitting some of my top cities to only be able to come back, hit those same cities, playing even bigger venues and adding the other places that I didn't get a chance to go to at first.
I'm so glad you mentioned analytics. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Yeah, I was going to say, so if you don't have an audience yet, you don't have all that data and analytics that Kenyon was able to gather because he has enough people now to be able to see the numbers up and down. You can literally just go to the Census Bureau in the government and figure out where are all the married people who are over 40 years old, let's say, and they'll give you those cities. So there's ways to find this information, even if you're not able to do that. I would say read Ad Age and Ad Week. A lot of things about different, you could just learn the lingo of marketing, right? Learn what that means to have a demographic, to know where the top 10 cities for certain products are, where buyers get things from. All of these things is very readily available given the internet these days. So even if you don't have current good numbers on your own projects, the information and in terms of where your audience may be is available so many places. So look for it. Don't feel like, oh man, I got to get my stuff up before I can figure it out. No. Or you can do, like I say, don't recreate the wheel. Go do Kenyon's tour. Just do all them cities that he going to.
Yes.
Yeah. If you feel like, because I come from the music business where we passed out flyers and CDs at shows, right?
Yes.
So we wasn't looking up analytics. We knew
Yeah.
that if you came to the Jill Scott concert, you might listen to my
Find
music.
your crowd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen
Yeah.
to my music. So I'm gonna stand out here with my CDs. I got 12 of them, and I'm gonna pass them out and hope you listen to me. So
Yep.
do what you gotta do, whether it's guerrilla or really highly researched, or just I got a feeling that I should be outside of this place. And do what you gotta do to find your audience and get your music out there. I know people ain't about feet on the ground anymore, but I bet you'll probably be the only one out there if you were to try that. you know so just think of new ways to find your audience. So I just want to throw that in there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I wonder, kind of as we come to the close of the interview, if you were to go back and talk to yourself right before you really released your first single and give yourself advice based on what you know now, what advice would you give a younger Kenyon?
Man, just do it. Put it out. Like I say that I say this to a lot of younger creatives. We get in our head so much and try to perfect the art before we've become artists. It's hypothetical if you have no product for what you say you want to do. So I think it's so important to actually go through the experience of trial and error. That's how I figured out, what I wanted to do with my music. I created some stuff I liked, some stuff I didn't like, but I never would have known that unless I just went ahead and did it. And I think a lot of the times we start off wanting to be perfect already. And I understand that it's really tough now, in a world that's ran by social media, because you get online, all you see is a bunch of finished products of stuff. So of course that's going to apply some pressure and make you feel like you have to compete with that, but you don't. And nobody tells you that. So it's like, even the artists that I had worked with before, I put out music, I'm like, but it got to sound like, why do I need my music to sound like somebody with $1 million budget? And I'm here, like, I don't have, I hadn't built their fan base at the time. I don't have the team that they have. Like, so that's something that, and, I think it's great to want to be excellent, but also allow yourself grace to figure stuff out. I think that that's something that I would tell myself. I was so hard on myself starting off, like coming from a family who already does music and like having a background in the arts already. And like, there's just certain stuff that you feel like you have to live up to. But when you think about those expectations, you have to then be honest with yourself and ask yourself, who's deciding them? Because as much as I'm doing this and I'm saying I have to do X, Y, and Z, it's like, based on who? Nobody told you that. You told yourself that you had to make sure, it was like whatever. So I say, just work on skill building and just developing your you. Like that's really it. That's all it is for me. So that's what I would tell myself. Just do it, figure it out. Just stay in motion and figure it out. Just don't get, discouraged about not getting it right the first time.
That's good.
Well said. Maybe, Carolyn, one final question from you, and then I'll ask a final one. Mine's a tech question, so we can kind of go back and forth, and then.
Oh, okay. You're asking tech. You know what? I just want to piggyback on what he said. I think the one thing that I like to tell people when they ask me for feedback is, don't ask me for blind feedback, because I'm only going to give you my opinion. You don't need my opinion to create. You need to figure out if you are portraying the vision that you had in mind to create when you were doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And so stop asking people for feedback who don't know your vision. Like, that doesn't get you anywhere. You have to talk to people who at least know or understand your vision, and then ask them, do you think I executed the vision that I had for myself? Right? Because otherwise we just talking about opinions on music, and to tell the truth, depending on how I'm feeling, I'm going to have different feedback about somebody's music. Right? Like, if I just went through a breakup and I'm listening to Kenyon, Marvin Gaye, I don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
Turn that off. I can't do that no more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you got to remember, don't give other people an opportunity to shut down what you're trying to do. But if you are trying to get feedback about whether or not you execute it, then that's okay to ask about feedback for it. But yeah, asking for too much feedback will just mess up your whole vision.
100%.
So that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I think to add to that, I was going to say, I think That's a very valid point. Like if you can't see what I see, then you can't detail it, because we're looking at two different things. And I remember someone telling me before that they were having a conversation with like a very wealthy person, and they were, you know, trying to ask questions about like how to get in that position. And I remember them telling me that the person told them like, I'd rather tell you about like my failures, not my success, because my success is personal to me. So it's not going to work for you. But failure, we would have in common if we're both trying something and it didn't work. So I can tell you what my mindset was and what I did to make sure that I didn't just give up on my vision overall. So that's something, you know, I always think about. So it's, yeah, you gotta, for a lot of different reasons, you got to be careful with sharing your vision, because some people will give you, you never know where they're giving you feedback from, what space. It could be to alter what your vision is because it's something that they don't want to see for you. Like there's so many different, you know, different reasons. But yeah, agree 100%.
So before I let Carolyn close out, I'm going to kind of geek out with you. You got your studio right there with you. I'm just curious. I'm you know, I'm a little bit of a nerd. And with
going down.
I love to buy things, and you know, I'm itching to buy something, but I won't. So, what is like the one or two pieces of equipment that you have in your studio that you can't live without?
The Sony SM7B right here, the Michael Jackson mic, they call it. He recorded a lot of vocals on there. I think it's amazing because it has this built-in compression. You don't have to have a pop filter. Like incredible. It's like plug and go pretty much. I'd say that, and one of the many MIDI controllers that I have sitting around probably.
Okay.
Either that or I go my Apollo. I think what's amazing about the Apollo, so as much as I believe in this mic, an Apollo interface can take a good mic to incredible. A good interface can do that to any mic. And so I think that's like a huge part of my sound, and you know, it adds to even my vocal chain as far as like the, you know, the plugins and stuff, and the sound I'm able to create. I think the warmness of this mic, because it's essentially just like a podcast mic, really. But the warmness of this mic and what the Apollo does to it and how it beefs it up, it creates the perfect like marriage of what I want to hear, like the perfect marriage of the frequency and what I want to hear sonically without me adding anything to it. I can go in there and never change an EQ and record an entire song with only hearing what the mic and interface is doing.
Interesting. All right. And you are on Pro Tools or Ableton Live? What's your DAW that you use?
So I produce in I produce in Logic. I record in Pro Tools. I refuse to record in Logic. I've tried it. I have friends who are like tech geeks and producers who, you know, who will argue that all of the DAWs are really the same and they can't really hear the difference between like the hertz. But I hear the difference when I'm recording, when I've tried to record in Logic versus recording in Pro Tools. So I will only record in Pro Tools, but I won't, vice versa. I've tried to produce in Pro Tools and I hate it. I only produce in Logic. So
I'm laughing because I think singers are partial to Pro Tools because that's just how we started recording.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know if we hear the difference, but I have heard so many singers, very professional singers who, you know, only do backgrounds for people or whatever. And it's like, nah, I can't let go of Pro Tools. I've tried. And
yeah.
Like, I think this is just how we started. I don't know. Because most of the other, I don't want to say kids, but there's so many multi-instrumentalists now that they produce their own tracks and sing and do it all. So they have to use Logic or whatever because they're doing it all in one thing. But for those of us who started in Pro Tools, I literally feel like this is why Pro Tools is still living, because singers are like, this is the only way I can.
I literally refuse. And I learned, well, that makes sense that I'm producing on Logic. I was going to say I first learned how to use music software my senior year in high school. I took music production and we worked on GarageBand at the time. And so Logic is really the same command. So it makes sense that that's what, you know, what I would want to produce on. But yeah, I first started recording on Pro Tools and I swear by it. I can hear the difference in any other program.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Final question from you, Carolyn, before we let our guest continue.
I have a final question. Should we let someone watching maybe ask a final question?
Okay. If you have a question in the chat, let us know. While we're waiting to see.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and then while we're waiting to see if anyone in the chat has a question, where can we support you? Where do you spend most of your time online, social media? Like, what's the best for us to support you?
So right now, best support noskipstour.com and happy to this live show. That's amazing that we're, I'm excited to bring to these different cities. But if you guys are on any of the social platforms, I'm pretty much Kenny Got Soul all around. Kenny Got Soul on Instagram, Kenny Got Soul on Twitter, Kenyon Dixon on Facebook. And then if you, looking to get into some more R&B that you haven't heard from myself, Kenyon Dixon on all platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, Amazon, Pandora, DSP of your choice. It's all there. So
what about TikTok? Are you active? What's your thoughts on that? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Because that's kind of taking over the industry. What are your thoughts on that?
I think TikTok's great. I think it's a great tool, and it just depends on what you want to use it for. Like, as an R&B artist, I'm on TikTok to have fun because that's not my market. Even the kids who are like TikTok's biggest demographic are not the people I market my music to. So I just like to get on TikTok, do the trends, and sometimes you can do music stuff and sing and put your songs on there and it works. But I think depending on what your market is, like especially for pop artists and younger pop artists, especially, I think TikTok is incredible for them. But for myself and my listeners, they don't really care. They'll just go to Spotify, Apple Music, and stream.
Cool. So I now do have one final question.
Okay.
Can you shout out your musicians on the album? It sounded like Marvin Gaye may have had a live bass on it, but I just want to shout out any musicians who played on your album.
So first of all, with the Closer album, I think they just did an amazing job with selecting sounds, because I don't know if any of the sounds are actual instruments, but I know Marvin Gaye was produced by my guy Swoop, and there was additional production on there by my guys who I did my whole Expectations album with, Marcus Curtis and Chris Daniels. I Still Love You, Closer, Love on Replay, and Here were done by he's actually going to be one of my musicians on tour, Frank Rose. He plays keys. Frank, and there's a guy named Butterfly Wolf, he goes by. Chris Bivens, Ye Ali also produced on Love on Replay. A guy named Taz. I'm trying to think. Oh, so What You're Trying to Do, Dream of Me were produced by Now Hargrove and my guy Onision Gordon, and they're both musicians. So I think those might be the two songs that I know for sure have live instrumentation.
Okay.
Yeah, and I believe Now is like a part of the Hargrove family. Like, if you're familiar with Roy Hargrove and that entire legacy. So it makes sense because those are also I think the two really live music heavy records on there. Get High, Get By. Even though that's bass heavy, I played that bass on my MIDI controller, but using live bass sounds. So yeah, it's interesting. You're actually gonna make me ask about if they use any live instrumentation, because I think this might be the project where I did the least amount of my production. So yeah, it's we went back and forth sending stuff, but I never asked. So I'm curious now myself.
That's good. That's good. When I first started, I was in a group and it was a band in Chicago. It's funny, I'm in Chicago. And so when we recorded, we just recorded live with all the instruments and sang. So it was never, that's how I started recording. You know what I mean? I never was just recording to track. And so I always ask, shout out the musicians because they need love too. And yeah, so cool.
No, that makes perfect sense. I will say my song Hard Way, I always specifically shout this out on my last album. My brother Adam Blackstone is playing bass on that record.
Nice. So now we got to end with that. I think we should end the interview with Playing Hard Way. I had mentioned that I wanted to play it anyway.
Oh yeah.
I think that'll be a great thing. Thank you so much for doing this interview with us.
Yes.
Congrats on the tour. Y'all get your tickets to the tour.
Thank you.
And listen to Closer.
Go
Listen
listen
to
to
Expectations. Listen to all the previous catalog. This man has hundreds of songs.
Really, I can't believe it, but I really do.
Yeah, like for real. Because we were doing research and I was like, well, we can do this all day. So let's end with Hard Way. Y'all have a good evening. Thank y'all for listening.
Okay, here's Hard Way. And then we'll come back and Carol and I will tie up loose ends. Here's Hard Way.
Before, no, I'm not keeping score. I thought you learned by now. Showed you different love, things that were true to us. Hate that you're missing out, yeah. Never gonna find somebody else to make you feel the way I make you feel. You know, different, they won't compare. I know you better hear that I'm invisible, but you know I'ma say what's real. But if I'm honest,
right? It feels
I really hate to have to ruin the part. Yeah, like I'm a little close, but are they? Yeah, say to make them like me anymore. I'm sorry, you'll learn the hard way. I was more than enough for you. Yeah, I was too much for you. You should know what was on your mind without you ever saying it. You got so comfortable, but since you made your bed, I think you should just lay in it. Gave mine, you played with it. Yeah, you're bad. I know, but
love those strings. Woo!
Listen.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Kenyon, for appearing on the show. And we'll just continue to support you and stay in touch, but just appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys for having me.
All right. Have a good evening.
All right. Too.